Darker by Paul L. Arvidson. Narrated by Benjamin Fife. Title music by Nina West. Chapter 1. Padge and Tally huddled in their den above the main market of the stone folk, behind the hiding shield that they'd found before they parted company with Dunn. It had taken great care and time to find such a good hiding place, but after Padge's insistence they not rush in, and do some reconnaissance first, he felt obliged to find somewhere good. It was an odd, tall, and thin metal room in the walls between the grand entrance to the stone halls. It smelled like rust. All the action from the market floor could be heard from high-up metal grills in one side of the room, and the main river was accessed by a hatch via a flooded water pipe on the opposite side. Padge thought they were impossible to surprise. "I'm wet and tired," Padge said. "Is this the bit where we get to go home?" "No, this is the bit where I murder you for whining, and your lifeless corpse floats back to Bridgetown. Now shut up, I'm counting," Tally said. They had fashioned a listening horn from some thin sheet metal Padge had found. By tweaking its direction, it was possible to pick up a reasonable amount of sound from all around the central cavern and some of the passages. Tally listened to interactions at the main entrances as the stone guard filtered goods and folk in. It was all mostly in, and not a lot of that. The guards outnumbered the civilians 2 to 1, and it was the same everywhere. Curfews had been imposed after work cycle. Identification tattoos had become mandatory and were examined at a ridiculous number of checkpoints. Although people still tried to go about their business, no female folk were allowed out without special dispensation. It was eerily quiet, the main noises being new bells rung every cycle to command people to action or to bed, and announcements of new edicts from criers. The only thing not curtailed by these new happenings was the regular services of the Tinkralas. Though their hideout backed onto a temple, so they were immersed in the goings-on by proximity, if nothing else. Most of their spying had to be done outside of the services as the noisy Tinkrala worship drowned out everything else. "I'm glad, Padge said. "What?" "Glad to be here, really." "Oh, good." "Despite everything, "Yeah?" With you." "Oh. I like it." "Yeah," Tally said. "Yeah, me too. What the hell is that?" "Pardon?" "That chanting. Far side of the market. Listen." When Padge strained, using their bespoke listening horn, he could make out the half-chant, half-shout just at the edge of his hearing. It came from right over the far side of the massive market hall, maybe down one of the passages off there even, a repetitive shout. "What are they saying?" Tally asked. "No, I think. It sounds like they are saying no, over and over." "Sounds female? The voices?" "Yeah, almost all." "I wonder if that's where we'll find Amber." Since their stakeout to plan a rescue for their stonefolk friend, who'd done so much to help them, they hadn't heard hide nor hair of Amber. Padge, whose sense of smell was the keenest, and as a half-decent hunter, hadn't detected so much as a lingering whiff. In the time it took them to return from parting company with Dunn, it was like Amber had been spirited away. "We need a plan to get in there," Tally said. "Guess so," Padge said. "How?" "Disguise." "Okay. As what?" Traders." "Would have to be river folk." "Why?" "Don't be dense. Plan ahead. Can't be bridge folk, 'cause, we're at war. Can't be machine folk, 'cause they're all dead. Can't carry off being stone folk. They'd smell a rat right away. Would have to be river folk. Think you can carry that off? Tally said. Oh, there, that we turned into a you quick enough. Single trader, easier to hide? Got to be you or me. Leaves one of us as backup if anything goes wrong. Okay, not instilling me with confidence. Come on, Padge. We need to know more to have a chance of rescuing Amber. That was your crazy plan, as I remember. And you'd leave her to rot in a stonefolk cell, would you? Or worse? Okay, I'll go. My hero. The next span was punctuated by planning, sleeping, and practicing a decent riverfolk accent. From the supplies she had left and the food they had, Tolly thought she could compose a half-decent scent. They decided that a scout-out of who was where would be advisable first. I reckon Dunn would like us to add to the map, Padge said. Not if it's in your handwriting. Harsh. Tolly repurposed Padge's traveling clothes, much to his dismay, carefully making some fabric cross-gartering for leggings and a makeshift cloak that the riverfolk all wore. She finished the ensemble by making a jingling necklace of used flask tops and things she'd collected along the way. Bang goes my stealthy approach, Padge said. You're a riverfolk. You don't give a splosh about stealth. Cocky, remember? Thought you wouldn't have a problem with that bit. I used to like you. I'm sure my fragile ego can cope. Now, give me your best riverfolk. Arr! Nice. Gods help us. A loud clanging of handbells broke the conversation, then a pause, and then the same again. A sudden clamor of noise followed, almost as if someone had thrown a switch and turned the market on. Pipe's waiting, Riverboy, Tally said. Better get at it, then, Padge said. Hey. She came toward him. You really stink. They embraced, then Padge, still holding on, and said, That's high praise coming from an alchemist. Go, Tally said. You want to get in the first rush. Less scrutiny. Yeah, I should. Good luck. Won't need it, Padge said. He climbed through the pie patch and was gone. Tally listened, hunched at the grill facing the market, listening for signs of him passing through the checkpoint. Chapter 2. Raoul licked her claws. It was the third time in about 50 clicks. Being the bureaucrat obviously had its privileges, but gods did it require a lot of waiting about. She hated coming up here. It gave her the creeps. Not just because of the number of worthy bloody tincrawlas under her paws. They were a double-edged sword. But being in this place, with that thing, she shivered. The tincrawlas called this place the High Temple, and had established a permanent presence. That disturbed Raoul. They needed keeping tabs on, maybe teaching a lesson, but that was not for today. Today had a different agenda, part of a grander plan. Almost in response to her thoughts, she heard the heavy boots of her troops approaching. At last. Your Eminence, the troop leader spoke. Captain, do you have it? Yes, Your Eminence. Excellent. Find Aster and get this door open. We have no time to waste. The captain barked an order to a subordinate, who rushed off to summon the high priest of the Tincrawlas and keeper of the keys. Did you get to the human in time? Raoul asked. Yes, Your Eminence. Good, good. And removing the head? Was no trouble at all. My sergeant is very good with a knife. Excellent. You remembered the treatment? Yes, Your Eminence. As you instructed, the preservative was soaked into all the exposed tissues. Good. And the body was? Not more than 1,000 clicks old. We waited till the bridge folk had gone, and removed the body from where they had left it. We encountered no one. The remains we threw down a shaft. A waft of incense advertised the high priest's arrival. Raoul? He said, That's bureaucrat Raoul to you.
Yes, yes.
Open the door, please.
To the sanctuary? The High Temple?
Yes, whatever you call it. Open it.
But we must purify ourselves before we open the doors to the sacred presence.
You don't need to keep up all that sacred presence nonsense with me.
It is not some kind of act, a pretense for the peasants.
Isn't it? Oh, silly me. Get the door open. Aster rustled and clanked at his belt and fumbled the key into the door, huffing all the while. There was a click and a hiss. The door opened. The stench was physical. For all the times Raoul had been in here before, the smell, the volume of it, the depth of it, shocked her still. "In," she said, suppressing a gag.
"Yes, Your M."
"Quickly." She knew how long the awful reek hung after the seal had been breached. The less time the door was open, the better. There was a hissing behind them as the door was resealed. She herded her guard captain and 2 of his lieutenants across the room to the massive vat at its center. The high priest skulked around the center of the room with a requisite number of clerics. The plopping noises and uncomfortable warmth enveloped Raoul and reminded her of being boiled in soup, or maybe being in the lair of some malign carnivorous plant, complete with cables and pipes festooned like vines throughout the space. And that was before it spoke. Somehow the awful thing was wired to a kind of mouth through which the noises came. Raoul did not understand how any of it worked, and any amount of time spent contemplating caused the hairs on the back of her neck to stand on end. For now, the vat just hummed quietly. Not an electronic hum, but the hum of a distracted child. "Bring it forward," Raoul said testily, sensing the awkwardness in the room.
"Bring forth the new offering,"
Aster said. Raoul sighed. The soldiers shuffled nervously forward. The priests leaned in.
"We must prepare the offering,"
Aster shouted. "Just get on with it," Raoul said from between clenched teeth. The high priest fussed and chittered around, while one of the clerics, who seemed to be a technician, reached for various bundles of wires and pipes, shaking some and flicking others until she seemed to be satisfied. There was an unnerving squelching noise as the pipes and wires were attached where needed. "Done."
"Thank you, Sap,"
Aster said.
"You may proceed, bureaucrat."
"Thank you. Now please, Captain." The ghastly trophy was dropped into the vat with a bloop sound. There was a rustle of cables, and then an odd silence. An in-between silence. That was all for now. One thing less to worry over, so she could concentrate on her plans. This place would not run itself. Someone needed to be bureaucrat, and for now that burden lay squarely on her shoulders. Raoul stood with her hands on her hips. "Is that it? Done, then?"
"We must wait now and see if the new offering is accepted."
Aster took out a clicker beetle and shook it to start it clicking. "Ah." Raoul turned to her guard captain and said in a whisper, "The next part of our undertakings?"
"Underway," he said.
"Good. The duchy forces?" Raoul asked.
"Await your command, bureaucrat."
"Excellent. And our commando team?"
"In place, ready to seize our prize when the attack begins. The collective won't know what hit them."
"Good. Give word immediately. We are finished here," she said, and then turned to Sap. "You will soon have a new toy to play with." "Oh?" Sap said, startled. "I believe you will find it interesting." "Thank you, bureaucrat." "Think nothing of it. Besides, it will require your particular technical aptitudes to put it to its best advantage."
"It's a weapon, then?"
Aster said.
Such a blunt word. It could be many things with refinement. I have high hopes. I'm sure, Astor said. Are we done now? Bureaucrat said. The beetle was still clicking. Not yet. Raoul harumphed. The beetle stopped clicking. There was no noise in the room. Now we are done, the high priest said. He left first, and his entourage followed. Go, go. Raoul ushered the shoulders out of the door. As the door slowly closed behind her, she was sure she heard the vat sigh. Chapter 3. Dunn and the rest of Squad Alpha crouched below the ridge alongside the huge causeway. Tension rippled through the group. Hey, Chief, Kaj hissed at him. Shh, Dunn replied. Next to him, Kaj sighed. Since their promotion to the unit, most likely to get sent out on suicide missions, he'd spent a lot of time with the young pup. She was extremely capable, which didn't surprise Dunn hugely. Her late mother, Steph, was Dunn's first real mate. He felt awful and sad when he thought too long about Steph. He'd loved her, and she died on the first mission Dunn had planned. This mission was easy compared to previous. A large consignment of medicines and food was being moved by wheeled truck. The intel was good, the guard complement small. Their plan was straightforward. Hijack the truck, capture the guards, drive the whole thing back to a floater, and glide back to base. Base to Alpha? The voice appearing inside his head always made Dunn jump. He'd begun his life thinking that as a shaman he was hearing things from the great beyond. Turned out the great beyond was a transmitter that could collect thoughts and project them. Shamans turned out to be good receivers. Less esoteric and more useful all around. They still got called shamans, though. Cute. And now it was less of a stigma admitting being a radio receiver than a loony who heard God. More folk came forward with the skills. Still not many, so far 6 in the whole of the collective, but enough to make sending them with missions and on intel gathering vital. They varied in ability, and Tam and Bell, the leaders of the collective, had started a project to test everyone in the camp. Nev had been promoted from his duty of drain maintenance and mapping as the most capable technician to head up the project. When they were back at base, Dunn and Kaj had been drafted in to see if it was possible to teach receiving to the unskilled. So far their attempts had been entertaining but fruitless. He liked working with Kaj. Base to Alpha. Come in, Dunn. What? Dunn thought back in his head. Are you still in position? Why would I have moved? The transmitter operator today was obviously new to it. Somehow newness with the kit seemed to breed over-communication. Understandable, sure, but no less annoying. Dunn seemed to have no patience at all these days. It wasn't the pup at the other end of the line's fault. He knew that. Waiting on command. Alpha, stay in place. Thanks. He sighed. Some people were just too cheerful at their work. They heard a rumbling from the far end of the causeway. It could only be the transport. Dunn tapped twice on Kaj's arm to message her to stand by. She passed the signal down the line to the 4 others in their party. One made a small squeak, nerves probably. The rumbling stopped. They heard voices, too far away to be clear. Tense, but not so tense that Dunn thought their position was vulnerable. A scent wafted their way, carried on the same breeze that brought the voices. Ammonia, musky male smell. Ah, toilet break then. Vehicle doors banged, and the rumbling started again. Dunn kept his profile flat to the edge of the causeway, so no one scanning about with their air sense would pick up a flicker of anything untoward. He cocked the crossbow that had become his favored weapon of late. One of the community healers had concocted a rather effective knockout poison. Alpha to base. Target in position. Silence. Alpha to base. Repeat. Target in position. Do we have go to proceed? Silence. Come on, base. We need to move on this, or we'll lose them. Then a burst of something exploded in Dunn's head. Surprise, then fear. The sound of weapons fire, then massive static, then nothing. Dunn cursed. What now, boss? We're going to lose them, Cash said. No, we're not. Ready concussions, ready bridge charges. The truck rumbled overhead. Go! The concussion blasts shook out overhead. The truck had rolled too far past them for the bridge charges to be effective. It sounded like a wheel had blown out on the vehicle, which slewed dangerously to the edge of the causeway. Shreds! Dive! Cash yelled. Bill? Yelled one of the juniors. No! Cried Dunn, and as the truck back past them, he jumped up. Gods! Cad shouted. Then, turning to the rest of the squad, Go! On the causeway, Dunn sprinted after the truck in the hope that veering wildly would slow it down. He found the slewing of the truck was moving too much air in its wake and blurring his senses. The corner smashed into him, and he grabbed reflexively. He needed to get the damn truck stopped. There were enough ties and handholds on the edge of the fabric sides of the truck for him to get enough purchase, despite the crazy action of the vehicle. He just about kept his feet on a rail along the side of the truck and edged hand over hand toward the cab. Behind him, he heard a metallic flap smack and felt a shudder from the back of the van, then a shout of voices and weapons discharge, probably needle guns. There were a lot of voices. Dunn's hand tightened around the strap he was holding. He was just an arm's reach to the cab. The truck bounced on its suspension as something or some things came loose from the back. He leaned in as the truck veered again and made a wild grab. A handle. He pulled, the cab door swung open, only to be followed by a shout and the click of a gun. He felt fire in his right leg, gritted his teeth, and kicked up with his left. His toe connected with someone's chin. A lucky hit, but a square one. That someone fell forward, and their weight took them out of the door of the truck to tumble on the causeway. Dunn clung to the handle for dear life. The truck veered again, swinging the door and smashing Dunn against the frame. He whooshed out of breath and gripped tighter from the outswing. The driver was wrestling the steering to and fro to lose him. On the inswing this time he was ready. He jammed his feet on the van step and then reached out for the top of the door frame. As the door next swung out, Dunn swung himself into the cab. "Yatcha!" he shouted, kicking out with all his force. The door on the driver's side of the truck must have been missing because the driver flew out of the cab, and Dunn nearly followed. Only his foot caught on a lever, which stopped his momentum. Right foot, obviously. Dunn winced again, but crawled back along the driver's seat to find his foot. He pulled levers frantically until he worked out the brake from the squealing noise. He pulled hard. The truck veered one more time, skidded on the causeway, paused at its point of balance as if drawing breath, and then slowly toppled off its wheels. Dunn hung by 1 foot from the steering lever, with his face pressed against the truck's bulkhead. Back down the causeway, he could hear fierce fighting and screams. Shreds! By the time he'd extracted his foot, the fight was all but over. He limped along the causeway, wind behind him, stopping once to check on the state of a fallen Dutchy fighter. Feeling the side of his throat, he found a slow but faint pulse. Worth going back for, he thought. Then he caught the smell of the blood and heard the whimpering. Bastards, Cadge said, breathless. There were loads of them. 10, maybe. Damn them. Pawn? Her name was Palm, and she's dead. All of them except Harp, and he's not in great shape. Over here. They lifted their comrade by 1 arm each. He seemed heavier than a young folk should. Slowly, they drag-walked him to the back of the truck.
They eased him down and leaned him against the side. Harp groaned. Kaj climbed carefully into the back. Dunn twitched his ear to the breeze.
No, no, no!
What? Dunn said.
Empty. All empty. Trap.
All the air went out of Kaj's lungs.
Damn. Not a trap. A feint,
Dunn said.
No time now,
Kaj shouted.
Company.
The sound of smaller, lighter troop-carrying vehicles, more than 2, sped from the same direction the truck had.
Damn, damn, damn.
Dunn ran toward the noise as far as the unconscious Dutchy soldier. Then he kicked him off the causeway.
Move, now, gliders,
Dunn yelled, running back toward the truck.
What about Harp?
Dunn paused.
No,
Kaj said.
No.
There was a twang of a trigger and a thud as the bolt struck home. Harp slumped down the truck.
No,
Kaj said.
Why the hells? He was only a pup, you.
Go, now, glider, Dunn shouted. And reluctantly, stumbling half-pushed, she strapped herself beneath the one-person glider and jumped into the void, tears streaming down her fur. Chapter 4. Tali heard him from 500 strides away. She also heard the crash he created as he tipped a market stall on his way. Padge returned, breathless at a clip, barged through bewildered guards at the front gates, jumped into the river pipe with a splash, and swam upstream to avoid being followed. It was 1,200 clicks before he arrived, soggy and panting, back in their hideout.
I guess we'd better move on sooner rather than later,
Tali said.
Huh?
Padge dried himself on a sacking rag.
Well, after that performance, everyone knows we're here.
They'll still never find us. This hiding place is great.
Yeah, but now they know there's someone to find. Some guard might get lucky.
I guess, Padge said, and passed Tali the rag.
What did you find out?
She winced at the dampness on the rag. At least it was less damp than she was. All of the servants are being locked into rooms after work cycle.
Gods.
Yeah, the conditions aren't great.
Did you find Amber?
No, but I did find a few folk who said she was alive, but they wouldn't tell me any more than that.
Fear of reprisals?
No, I think they trusted we weren't stone folk, but I think she's become the focus of protests.
A rebel leader?
I guess.
Wow, who'd have thought?
Padge made a neutral grunt noise, then said, Do we have a plan if I didn't find her?
I think we help the servants, don't we?
Hells, that's a bit of a leap.
Is it?
Yeah, it's one thing to sneak in and try to extract one person. That we could do between us, but to free everyone, all at once, that's going up against all the stone folk, and it's going to take an army.
Let me think a while,
Tali said. Padge broke out some fish he'd caught, and Tali paced. Padge chewed. Want some? He said.
No.
Padge chewed with increasing loudness.
Enough!
Off! Padge said, as wounded as he could manage, with his mouth stuffed.
Okay, I'll eat.
She sat down and ate. There were fish and really great hubbas that Padge had liberated from the market. After washing it down with some water, she couldn't keep her eyes open. In 100 clicks, she had slid down against Padge gently and was snoring quietly. Padge put his arm around her and drifted off himself. Padge woke up to a ghastly smell. Gods, that fish didn't agree with you, he said. Tali laughed. There were noises of pouring and mixing.
Sorry, I didn't think about putting nose plugs in you while you slept. But you were snoring so loudly, I thought I might suffocate you.
I'm guessing you've had a plan, then.
Yeah.
Care to share?
Yeah, but give me a minute, okay? There's hubbas left from yesterday. And there are nose plugs in the side pocket of my pack. That steam vent hot enough to make Rakta, you think? I scored some powder from the market yesterday. You've become quite the little thief, haven't you? Tally said. Well, what with the prices and how few folks there are out, I'd have thought they'd be glad of the trade. Tally laughed. Nearly there. And done. There was the sound of a cork bung squeaking into a flask, and what could only be described as a sigh of smugness from Tally. Padge poured Rakta into beakers. It wasn't hot enough, but the taste was acceptable. So, Padge said. So? Gonna let me in on the plan? Ah, yes, Tally said. Plague. Padge spat out the Rakta. What? An osmic plague. You're insane. Why, thank you. I was rather proud of that one myself. And now explain. Well, Tally said, the anosmic plague virus attacks the mucous membranes. The host loses all sense of smell, and then the virus replicates inside them so fast that the carrier's body rots from the inside. All the time before the host dies, huge wafts of the virus are borne upon the smell of the person decomposing. Anosmic plague has a unique smell, which I presume is this smell that's interfering with my Rakta. The very same. Nice. So you're going to give everyone the plague? No, but by the time I've finished, they'll think they have. I found a rather nice plant combo that matches the smell beautifully, and then there's a carrier oil that makes it hang around for ages. Great. We're going to smell like this for spans, then. Yep. Okay. How do we deliver it? I was hoping we could get it to the middle of the market. I've got some pottery flasks that will smash beautifully. Sneaking in the front again? No. I rather thought we'd avoid that and unscrew this grill and go in the nearest way. We're not going to need a hiding place again either way, are we? That all sounds a bit final. You in? You don't have to do this. The bell for start of work cycle for the stone folk rang out through the grill. The sound of weary footsteps began in the marketplace. Guards shouting instructions. A Tinkrala priest's ululating call, inviting people to prayer. Okay, I'm in. They set to work huddled together, gently and quietly removing the grill, taking care not to make extraneous noise or sudden moves. The grill was much more firmly affixed than either of them had factored on. Long, heavy bolts with unusually shaped heads made for slow work. By the time the last bolt came loose, they had eaten again, and the bell for the end of work cycle had rung. That's the last one, Padge said. Should we move now, or wait? Tally said. Now's as fine a time as any. I guess. You good? Padge said. All packed. Flasks ready. Let's do it, Padge said. Hey, Tally said. Yeah? She pulled him close and kissed him. You know, she said, just in case. Yeah. He pulled the freed bolts loose. The grill dropped down with less of a clunk than he'd imagined. Must be plants growing in the cracks, he thought. Padge slid it to one side and twitched his nose into the air, sniffing this way and that. Clear, I think. Hard to smell anything above the stuff, he whispered. Let's go. He climbed out and reached a hand into Tally. Thanks. Which way? Between the stalls. All the main lanes in and out will be guarded. Where the bridge folk had ropeways underfoot as the main thoroughfares, here they had stone lanes, different textured pathways carved for routes to and from each important gathering place. They crawled and edged past the diverse stalls of the stone folk. Despite the work-home rush, it seemed that trade was still sparse. The only small crowd was outside a Tinkrala temple, where a weird talisman of woven wires seemed to be being sold as religious icons. They headed to the center of the market, where a large terraced stone amphitheater filled the space. It was used for announcements, meetings, auctions, and entertainment. It, too, was weirdly empty.
Tally and Padge crawled out from between two stalls built from piles of rock assembled in waist-high rectangles. They stretched themselves out and air-sensed the area. A small cluster of guards murmured quietly 50 or so strides away. A slight breeze wafted racta smells toward them. "Quickly, now's our chance." Tally strode toward the amphitheater. Padge followed in time to hear her gasp. She fell forward, tumbling head over heels down the terrace. All Padge could do was jog as fast as he could, following her without tripping himself. Behind him, he could hear the guards reacting. Tally came to a halt at the bottom level with a crunch. Padge caught up, the smell of Tally's anosmia gas enveloping them like a cloud. Shouts had already rung out from the top layer of the bowl for more guards. Padge lifted his head and air-sensed around. 4 staircases, 1 in each of the cardinal points. 3 with a guard coming down. But there was no way to leave Tally, and he wasn't sure she'd be able to stand anyway. "Tally," he whispered in her ear, shaking her gently. Out cold. She must have banged her head in the tumble. 20 strides away, the guards called out, "Can we assist?" "No thanks, we're fine," Padge said. "I don't think so," the guard said. There was an authority in the voice. A sergeant? A leader, certainly. The guard closed, stone-tipped spear first. Padge could feel 2 others closing behind him and hear others at the top of the bowl. "Stand up, slowly. Hands on your head." He jabbed the spear point, careful not to puncture. To ensure compliance. "Your friend, too." "She can't." "Oh?" "I think she hurt herself in the fall." He turned to a subordinate. "Get medics, please. Have them meet us at the garret." The garret appeared to be a makeshift prison made of stone pillars, on one end of the central market clearing above the amphitheater. 3 pillars to a side with too small a gap to squeeze past. Padge was pushed through the 4th side, and then a group of guards lifted the last pillar into place, completing the last side. Open-roofed, but too high to climb out, this was a simple yet effective prison. Shreds. Chapter 5. Dunn picked up a 2-folk glider for ease, scooped up Kaj on the way past, and cut the tethers on the other gliders to free fall and to avoid pursuit. Kaj was ominously silent. "What?" Dunn said. "Nothing." "Come on," Dunn said. "You? What are you?" "Sorry?" "I don't recognize you anymore. Mom said you were one of the good ones." The glider banked steeply. It took a while after her death to find out that Steph even had a pup. Such was the whirl of the way Dunn had arrived at the collective, and for that matter the way the collective was anyway, that he had been on several raids with Kaj before he knew who she was. He still missed Steph, for all the short time he had known her. He still felt guilty and angry for his part in the botched raid that caused her death. Oddly, Kaj didn't bear him any ill will, despite knowing everything that had gone on. It didn't make him feel a whole lot better. Dunn focused his air sense below them, to find the mouth-shaped entrance to the duct that would fly them home. It was way down beneath them, thundering toward them at all the speed that gravity could muster. Glider drops were always like that. You only got one shot, and if you messed up, well, the best glider pilots didn't think about messing it up. The worst never came back. 500 strides. Dunn wished he had an answer for Kaj. He owed her. 400 strides. But all the answers in his head sounded hollow. 300. Concentrate. 250. 200. Damn, off-center. 150. 100. 50. "Lean!" he yelled. 40, 30, 20, 10, 5. More! Bang! The wind went out of Dunn as the glider was winged on the hard metal edge. The wing spar snapped in the middle. The remains of the wing flapped wildly. The glider started to spin out of control. "Hells!" Kaj shouted. Their barely controlled plummet ended in a thud at a sharp bend in the pipe. The idea was to bank the glider and run the last 1,000 strides. The glider was a wreck. Dunn and Kaj groaned. "Sorry," Dunn said when he'd gathered his breath. "Any landing you walk away from... limp away from." They dragged themselves, a remaining kit bag and weapons, toward the end of the pipe, Dunn in the lead. "Nev's going to go mental," Kaj said. Resources were sparse. They'd gone out with 4 gliders and returned with none. Dunn was more worried about Bell's reaction. 4 comrades lost. And for what? "What?" Kaj bumped into Dunn. "Fighting." Dunn broke into a trot. "Damn, damn, damn." Then Kaj could hear it too. Weapons and shouting, clashes and concussions. They dumped what was left of their stuff, shouldered up their weapons, and ran across the hangar, to the corridor the noise came from. "Careful," Dunn said. "Yeah." Kaj cocked the needler and headed toward the noise. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the control room. They crept warily, edging along the walls, one on each side. Then a huge concussion happened, followed by hissing. "Damn," Kaj said, heading farther in. Dunn stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. "Gas. Back out." "There should be masks in the hangar." "Go," Dunn said, letting Kaj go first, but covering the passage as he backed up. Slowly, a sweet, sickly smell trailed after them. "Quickly!" Kaj bashed her way through random boxes with embossed symbols on. It was chaos down here. Clearly, Nev hadn't had time to get on top of things or find a new deputy. "Come on!" Dunn shouted, starting to feel the faint fizz of dizziness at the edge of his head. "Looking!" Kaj crashing another lid. "Don't need guns, don't need that. Where are you?" Dunn's ears twitched as he heard footsteps in the corridor. His brain did not stop spinning when his head did. "Incoming," he hissed. He started firing his needler into the corridor mouth and sidled toward Kaj to find cover from the edge of a box. He was losing focus. "Found them." Kaj fumbled with a pack. She slipped a cool-feeling plastic over her mouth and snapped the tab to start some air. There was a twang by her ear. She sucked down, reaching to where Dunn was. He was sliding down the box, trying to bring his still-firing gun to bear. "Come on," she said. "Don't lose it, you ass." She reached around to his face and tried to pull the cord to get behind his head with her other hand. Dunn groaned. Ahead, she heard footsteps. The booted feet of duchy soldiers. "Damn." She reached down Dunn's arm, limp from the shoulder, but his finger still gripped tightly around the trigger. She raised it, gun arm and all. "No, you don't." She sprayed the gun in a wild arc. A gasp came from right in front of her, so she kicked out sideways and connected squarely with someone's chest. The duchy soldier flew across the room. It was a good kick and crashed into the wall by the door with a satisfying sound. It was enough to startle the next soldier through the door. Kaj let go of Dunn and fired toward the gasp. She heard the needles strike home, then muffled shouting farther in the corridor. "Pull back!" She felt for clues on one of the bodies. Curious robes. Not soldiers' fatigues, and a wiry pendant thing around his neck instead of ID tags. Kaj scuttled back over to Dunn and applied the mask, and then cracked the air. "Come on, Sleepy," she said, cradling his head with one hand, gun covering the exit with the other. Dunn groaned and rolled over, falling off Kaj's hand and cracking his head on the hard floor of the hangar. "Ow!" "Oopsie."
Come on, you, come around. I kind of need a hand here.
She gently towed him in the ribs.
I'll come around if you stop beating me up. Deal.
She propped Dunn back up against the box and went to retrieve a water canteen from her pack.
Better? Thanks. Right. We can't sit here all day, she said. Where are they? They left by a different way. I think I surprised them. Or they weren't up for a fight,
Dunn said. Let's go and find out.
Wait on,
Cash said, ripping a strip from the bottom of her shirt.
Let's get this scumbag tied up first.
We haven't got time, Dunn said.
You've shot enough people for one day. Let's get a few questions out of this one later. Help me get him into this crate for later.
That done, they edged, weapons forward, back into the corridor. Aside from the usual fans and creaking of metal, it was eerily quiet. At the control room intersection, they nearly tripped over the first body. Dunn cursed and adjusted his mask. He reached down.
Pulse?
Yeah. Dunn felt the artery, but deep and slow.
The gas?
Yeah, but shot too. Superficial. Should be okay for a bit. They found 3 more bodies on the way into the control room, and 2 more making their way out of the dining room doorway, all unconscious.
Think the gas is gone by now?
Cash asked. Dunno, but let's not try it out, eh?
Well, no.
They encountered more bodies further into the control room and weapons scattered everywhere.
Damn.
Dunn checked the pulse on who he thought to be Tam.
Not dead?
No.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
So far as it goes, yeah. But they could have killed everyone.
Perhaps we spooked them?
Cash said. Yeah, dream on, hero. I don't think that was their mission.
What do you mean?
I mean they didn't have the numbers to risk a fight. I think this was a specific mission for a specific group. They wanted something. Dunn opened the door into the adjoining transmitter room, and there were 2 more in there, one of whom had crazy hair that could only be Nev. Dunn took a chance and removed his mask, placing it, the air still hissing, onto Nev's face. Slowly, as the air filled his lungs, Nev coughed himself back to consciousness. Easy there, fella, Dunn said. You still got that water, Cash? She passed it over. Nev sipped, coughed, and then sipped again.
Transmitter, he croaked out. They took the transmitter.
Chapter 6. The bureaucrat was pacing again. Where was that idiot priest? She had summoned Aster twice now. Getting ignored made her very angry. If she just killed him, would his 2 lieutenants, Sap and Whip, just step up? Even if they did, there was something useful about Aster's piety. It made him vulnerable. If the 2 minions weren't, for all their stupidity, it made the bureaucrat's position more unpredictable. Raoul sighed and heard a shuffling sound outside her door. Why were these rodents so edgy all the time? It's not as if she'd eaten one in ages. She slowly extended her claws and gently licked them. She so missed having other felines as helpers. Also, she missed her mates. Her consort was gone these 3 ages. They were the last, now only her. Last of the cat people. The folk had their uses. She would be without help if not for them, but it wasn't the same. The shuffling turned into a nervous tap at the door.
"What?"
she shouted.
Bureaucrat? Yes, what? And come in for the sake of all the gods."
The door creaked open. A nervous nose twitched in and sniffed the air.
"In damn you."
The minion shuffled in.
"Well,"
Raoul said,
your Eminence. Sit down. Now speak slowly and clearly and stop shaking. " 'Your Eminence, the Tinkralas are up to something.' The tin-crawlers are always up to something. This is news. Why? They are bringing something here. Something they have stolen. I see. And what is it? A device that the collective have been using. To communicate without speaking, Raoul said. Yes, I know. Then you sent them. Then you sent them. Then you sent them. No, Raoul exhaled. It was becoming a long, long span. What is your name again? I? The minion paused. I am Akka, your eminence. Well then, Akka, let me explain. I did not send them. I allowed them to think they had done it themselves. That way they are enthused with their task, feeling engaged, and still bring me the thing that I need. You have known about this thing? For a long time, yes. The underfolk have had shamans for eons. Then the machine folk found this lost treasure. They were your people before, no? Yes. And you had never come across this transmitter before? No, it was discovered before my time, Akka said. Well, suffice to say, when the machine people were challenged in their arrogance by the greatness of the bureaucracy, few survived. One that had took her knowledge of the machine to the collective, and they have used it ever since. It gives them an unfortunate advantage. But for the scarcity of shamans in the population, we could have been in quite a bind. So, you are having the device brought here to use ourselves? No, not really. I do not understand, Your Eminence. No, you wouldn't. Raoul scraped her claws slowly along the metal surface of her desk. I don't care what happens to it as long as it is out of the hands of the collective. That way their squabble with the duchy will contain them, and we will not be disturbed. Akka said. I am pleased you have sufficient enterprise to have informants keeping an ear out for their activities. Thank you, Your Honor. My agents are motivated, efficient. Good. Keep it that way. Now, after work span today, they will return? Yes, Your Honor. Good. The guards for that shift will all be trainees and will be issued with extra treats. You understand? Yes, bureaucrat. Excellent. Make it happen. Other news? Spit it out. There is unrest among the underfolk. That is far from new. It could usefully be called war now. The stonefolk have declared martial law in their realm, and their alliance with the riverfolk threatens to engulf the loose alliance of the bridgefolk and the mushroom people. I feel our erstwhile ally Obsidian gets above his station. I feel a more active listening style with him has become more appropriate. Do we have his scent on record? I believe we do, Your Excellence. Good. Prime up a rat missile as a contingency. If he pushes further, we will end him. As you wish. At the end of work cycle in the bureaucracy, Raoul curled under the vent in the cozy nest she had made. The smell of the folk pelts was fading now, but she enjoyed how comfortable and warm they felt, even when it was cold. She never used to feel the cold when she was young. She stretched a leg and yawned. She flicked the vanes on the vent toward her, so she could better hear the goings-on from the high temple room below her. Raoul found it hard to concentrate on what she was listening to, with the tendrils of smell from the vat rising. She sneezed, and then reached for some nose wax. She didn't want that thing in her room. The thought made her cringe. She reached for a drink from the bowl next to her bed, then sat still, back upright, and twitched her ears. The guard was snoring. That much she could hear. Then something else. Singing? No, chanting. Tingcrawler voices, but not their usual prayer chant. Gods, she hated all their superstitious rubbish. She clenched her eyes tight shut. In her mind, the scene played out. That stupid priest holding the new relic aloft, then taking a piece of machinery to be blessed by a pool of rotting organic waste. Savages. The chanting became louder. There seemed to be a great number of inner circle priests, more than usual. Whatever the guard had been treated with was clearly strong stuff. He snored on while the procession crowded past and into the chamber. The group chanted for a while in the chamber, and then the high priest called for silence. Raoul found herself with her ear pressed to the vent. What were they doing down there? There were barked instructions, and technicians called for. Not just a blessing, then. What did the crazy priest have in mind? Then rustling of cables and pipes, muttering, and the sound of equipment powering up. Our work here is done, brothers and sisters. Let us pray that the Presence now accepts our offering, and can use it to aggrandize its sacred self, and the humble Tingcrawlers along with it. All praise to the sacred Presence. Raoul listened as the procession chattered off into the distance, cheery voices singing. The guard continued snoring. It would be a shame to have him executed come workspan tomorrow, but no point in letting the underlings sense weakness. She drifted off to sleep, purring